Hey everybody, I'm Sara-Anne from Sara-Anne Photography, and we are here in my studio, and today we are going to talk a little bit about photography and how hopefully we can help you learn to use your camera better.
And I'm Suzanne, the Crazy Blonde, and I have been a student of Sara-Anne's, and she's taught me a lot about photography, and I'm excited to be able to share this video with all of you so that you can learn to use your camera and take better pictures.
So we're going to get started, and one of the things that is just a good thing to realize is that photography is all about light. It's all about how much light you let into your camera. It's about what type of lenses you use to let more light in, and it's just about manipulating the light. And if you can always remember that, then it will help you understand your settings better. And one of the things that I have taught Suzanne and that I teach all the time is that by working in manual mode, you are able to bypass what your camera thinks is the best setting. So that's why you're able to get a better picture. And you don't have to know all the technical nitty-gritty things, because I feel like that most people get bogged down with all of that. But if you could just understand the concepts of a couple of settings, shooting in manual, you are going to be able to get better pictures than if you were to shoot in auto.
And when I decided to shoot exclusively in manual, that's when I really started to learn, because I would set it and I would think I'd done it right, and I would take a picture and it would be too bright, so I've learned I can, in my mind, kind of know where to set my camera now, but it took a while.
Yeah, so it's about practice. You've learned that it's about practice, but Suzanne has done a fabulous job where she used to have people take a lot of her pictures for her. Now she is doing a lot of that on her own because she's learned all the tips and tricks that we're going to try to share with you over the next couple weeks.
And I'm still learning every day. Sara-Anne just taught me some really cool things that have actually changed a lot. So it's just, when you have a complicated camera, and I guess they're really all kind of complicated, you just have to keep learning every day.
Yeah, you have to practice, and the great thing about digitals is that you can just throw the images away, where film, it was costing you to practice. Now it doesn't cost you anything to practice, so that's a great thing. So the first thing is knowing your modes. And I'm shooting in a Canon, and Suzanne has a Nikon, so this will help as we move through that. Most people have one or the other. And they're both great cameras, so you can't go wrong with either. So we're gonna just start by putting your camera on M. See right there? M means manual mode.
And yours is identical to mine.
Right,
really,
we both have M's that's saying. And M means that you are shooting in manual, you have all control of your camera settings. Your camera isn't setting anything for you. And we're gonna briefly go over the three things that consist of the exposure triangle, or make up the exposure triangle: ISO, aperture, which is also your f-stop, and then shutter speed. And if you can learn those three things, you have got it. So those are the three things that we're going to go over today briefly, and there'll be a blog post that you'll be able to kind of dig in a little bit deeper, and then I'm always available for questions. Okay?
Yes, thank goodness.
So while you're in manual mode, we are going to first talk about your shutter. And the shutter is how fast your camera takes that picture. So, if you were to have a slow shutter speed, it would be like this, but if you have a fast shutter speed, it's like that. And a faster shutter speed means that you're going to be able to capture sharper images with a faster shutter speed.
But you're letting less light in,
but
because it's faster.
Absolutely. So if you can think of an elevator door, when it's pitch black on the inside, if it opens slow, then it's letting more light in. But if it opens really quick, then less light can get in that elevator. So the faster the shutter speed, the darker your image.
And the higher the number, the faster, the less light that you're letting in. The lower the number, the more light, but also the grainier and anything.
Right, so you wanna make sure that, a rule of thumb that I always tell people is to try to stay around 1,000 for your shutter speed, especially if you're taking pictures of people, kids, sports, you even wanna go higher, because the lower that shutter speed is, the more room there is for shake and blur. And so if you're struggling with sharp images, you really want a faster shutter speed.
And that's what was happening to me So the minute I corrected that and one other little trick she taught me, it really made all the difference.
Right. Suzanne was shooting, like trying to shoot a picture of she and her little moving grandson at one point. And
moving targets, I call them.
at a 500. Well, something's going to be blurry in that. But if you go up to 1,000 or even higher, you're going to have a sharper image. So the way that you do that on a Nikon, the button is just right here. It's just that dial.
Just turn it.
And you hold your camera up to your eye in the viewfinder.
Oh, she's doing it that way and I do it the other way, do it her way.
Yeah, you want to be able to see that image. You want to be able to see those numbers in your viewfinder, because if you pull it down, you're going to miss it. So you just want to see it. You're going to hold your shutter up and then you are going to move that dial. And you can practice by taking it all the way to the left and then taking it all the way to the right so you can see that those numbers move. But for right now, just try to put it at 1,000 so that you can see how that moves. For a Canon, it's right on top, right here. This dial right here, that's what you're going to turn.
And mine is just right here.
Yep.
And so I heard somebody suggest that when you're learning, that when you just go out and go for a walk and take a notebook with you, and when you take a good picture, write down the settings and kind of how the light was. So if it's, the middle of the day and it's bright sunlight and you use these settings and you're happy with the picture and you write it down, then you have that to reference. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think that that's a good idea. The other thing is when you load your pictures, it'll also give you the settings too. So you can see, if you are going through your pictures when you load and you're like, oh, wow, that was great. Go look at what we call the metadata of the image, and that's just usually in one click, and it'll tell you what your ISO was, what your shutter was, and what
She knows so much.
What your aperture was. The other thing that I often tell people to do if you're struggling, so say you're going to a birthday party and you really want to use manual, but you don't even know where to start, throw your camera in auto. That's the only time I'm going to tell you to do that. Throw your camera into auto, take a picture, and see where your camera starts in terms of where to start the settings. Set your settings to that and then adjust. It's just a good starting point. So it would give you, like if you go into a dark room and you're like, where do I even go? I just would suggest that you just throw your camera in auto, take a picture, look at what your shutter is for look where your aperture is and then go into manual and set it to those. It's just a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that's how you do your shutter, is right here or right there. And it's just
this is the
dial.
Nikon.
And you just want to get used to seeing that number in your viewfinder and moving it with the one finger. And you're going to change your shutter speed quite a bit, depending on what you're shooting. I will say right off the bat that if you're going to shoot sports and you want really crisp action shots, or you have a wiggly baby, you're going to want to take that shutter speed up to like 2,500 to have really crisp shots. So the higher the shutter speed, the sharper your image.
Yes.
And the darker
Best
the image.
tip ever.
Darker the image. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is your ISO. And ISO is basically the way that I describe it, and is way back in the day, before a lot of people, but not before me. We had film.
Well, I took film pictures, but I never knew what I was doing.
So you would go to the store and they would say, what speed of film you want? And if it was a cloudy day, you'd say, okay, I'm going to use an 800 speed film. Or if it was a sunny day, they would give you a 100 speed film. This is the same thing. ISO is the speed that your camera registers light. So for bright sunny days, you're going to keep your ISO at around 100. But for cloudy days or in the evening, you're going to bump your ISO higher. And it's the amount of light is let into your camera, the higher the number. So if you need a brighter image, you're going to want to raise the ISO.
So it's the opposite of the shutter speed, because the higher you raise your shutter speed,
the darker
the image, but the higher you raise your ISO, the lighter the image. And you'll figure that one out by playing with your camera, but it really does.
The way that so you want to find out where you need to change your ISO on your camera. For Canon, we just have a button right here that says ISO, and you hold that down and then you move the dial.
And mine is really similar. Mine is just hold this button down and then turn the dial that you would use for the shutter speed. But with the shutter speed, you just don't push the button down.
Right. And so you'll see most cameras begin at 100, or they all bring it at 100, and then they go up. And it just depends on your camera of what your ISO capability is. We both have pro cameras, and so our ISO capabilities are, 50,000, where some go up to 3,200. So, you just need to know what your camera does. The way to see exactly what ISO does is really to go outside, take a picture at 100, move it up to the next one, 200, take a picture, move it up to 400, take a picture, go up to 1,000 and take, so you can see really how much light and how much brighter your camera is getting. The trick though with ISO is that the higher the number, the more grain you're going to have in your image and the fuzzier it's going to be. And so you can know, like if you take a picture on your camera phone, your iPhone, and you go to upload it and it's really fuzzy, it's because the ISO, they had to move that ISO really high. So for sharper images, the lower the ISO, the better.
And that's not quite as important if you're using them for a blog or if you're putting them on Instagram. But if you ever wanted to have them printed and frame them, then you would want a really clear, crisp, especially if you're going to make them bigger.
Right. So like for Suzanne's purpose, she was trying to figure out where her ISO needed to be. One is that she has a very high ISO capability on your camera, 50,000. So she can shoot at a 3,000 ISO and be totally fine. However, like I would never want to print a picture that big behind me at a 3,000 ISO because you would start to see some of the grain. But she uses all her stuff is for her website, her blog, and her Instagram. And so there's a little bit more flexibility. So if you are a blogger or you're trying to do images for a web production, you can afford to go a little bit higher in your ISO in order to get a nice brighter image and properly exposed.
But it's funny, the more I learn about my camera and about photography, the better I want my images to be just anyway, because I want to have the best. And then if I ever do want to print them, especially with pictures of my dog or my grandsons, I want to be able to have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. So my rule of thumb is you want to shoot at the lowest ISO you possibly can get away with. But just know that if you are going to just use a picture for a blog and your image is too dark, that is one of the things that you can do is to really, in order to keep a high shutter speed, you can raise your ISO as well. I know it's a little bit confusing, but they are all very symbiotic, the three: ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed. So the last part is the aperture, which is also your f-stop. And this has to do with a focal point. So if you look at pictures, and there's going to be examples, but if you look at a picture and you see a beautifully, sharp, focused person, but the background is all what we call bokeh, blurry.
I love that too.
Yeah, that is because of the f-stop. The f-stop is very low. So what it does is a low f-stop, which this depends on your lens. It doesn't really depend on your camera. It depends on what your lens. So like this lens is a 1.2 f-stop. I believe yours is 2, a 1.2. But most lenses that come with cameras, the kit lenses that come with your camera, they're going to be a 5.6 or 4.6. So those lenses are going to let less light in than a camera or lens with a 1.2 f-stop. And the way that you change your f-stop on a Canon, on a Nikon, it's super easy. On a Canon, it's just we're holding in 2 buttons. You're holding in the star right here. This right here, and then you're moving that dial, and you'll be able to see those numbers change within your viewfinder as well. So the star button, we're going to hold that in. At the same time, we're going to move the dial. And then
and with the Nikon, it's just right here.
Yeah.
And you just turn this dial and it changes the f-stop. So it is really super easy.
Super easy. And you can see that. Again, this is something you want to get used to changing without having to look down. You want to change it while it's in your viewfinder and get familiar with your buttons up here, because if you pull it down to look on the back of your camera, usually you miss a shot.
Oh my gosh, especially with children.
With children, right.
They do something adorable and you miss it completely. So.
But you have to give yourself time to practice, because it really does just come. Like once you know, because do you feel like you have to look, do you feel like you can change?
I'm getting there.
Right, you can change more
But I've been practicing a lot the past couple of days. I've taken so many pictures. So.
Yeah, so the f-stop, now I will say the other thing about f-stop is that if you're taking pictures of multiple things, so you have a family and you want to take a picture, like a family like that behind me, that was shot at like a 3 f-stop or a 4 f-stop. Whereas one person, I can shoot at like a 1. So my rule of thumb is if you have 1 subject, you can shoot at the lowest f-stop you have. 2 subjects, you want to bump it up to 2, 3 subjects, 3. If you're taking pictures of landscape or nature or anything like that, and you want everything really super sharp and in focus, and you don't want any depth or blur, you're going to want to shoot at a higher f-stop.
Like if you're taking pictures of your living room,
right,
and you want to show the decor,
right,
then you would put the f-stop much higher so everything would be clear.
Right. Like my associate is getting ready to do some real estate photography, and one of the things I was telling her is to make sure that f-stop, her f-stop is really high, because otherwise, you don't want anything to be blurry. Everything needs to be crystal clear.
But then if you want to take a picture of the beautiful candle that was burning on your side table, then you would lower your f-stop, so you would just focus in on the candle and everything else would be blurry. Or even food pictures.
Right, food pictures. In food pictures, it's very pretty. And also, like on your iPhone or your phone where it says portrait mode, that is what it's dealing with. It's lowering the f-stop so that you get that beautiful, what we call bokeh.
But I really have noticed lately how blurry those pictures are. When you blow them up to edit something, you can tell that they're not the same quality as a camera.
As your camera. And so the lower the f-stop, the more light it's letting in. So if you need your images brighter, you're going to lower your f-stop. And that's why a lot of, if you see that bright and airy feel, they're shooting at a really low f-stop.
Yes, so much to learn, but this is the first of a series that we're going to do, and she's going to teach and I'm going to learn, and gosh, who knows, by the time this is over, I may be a professional photographer. We'll see.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Anyway, so I hope that you'll like this video and subscribe to both of our channels, and I will do a blog post and pop the YouTube video on the post so you can get it in your email if you are one of my subscribers, and I will link all Sara-Anne's information in my description box, and you can ask her questions, you can go to her blog,
Absolutely.
You can read and learn more about photography, and if you live close by, you can even hire her to take pictures for you.
Yep, well, I'm here. Thanks, everybody. It was really fun, and we look forward to coming again.
Thanks for watching.
All right.